want to introduce you now to Tim Constantine. He's a writer for the Washington Times and the host of the Capitol Hill show. A very warm welcome to you. So, Tim, help us out here, because on Truth Social, President Trump is posting about, quote, productive conversations and, quote, very good talks, even extending the deadline for further attacks, I think, till April the 6th now is the latest date. I mean, how do we square that with the Pentagon moving thousands of troops into the region, along with military hardware, or reportedly wargaming a coastal raid on Karg Island? I mean, markets are in a headspin. Nobody knows what's going on next. In spite of the diplomatic efforts that we're seeing in Islamabad, what's going on?
You've answered your own question there. No one knows what's going on next. So you must, whether you're Iran or the United States, you must continue to plan for all possibilities, including the worst possibilities, hostilities, war, and so on. So looking at bringing troops in or game planning what the different options are, that's just a prudent step on both sides to make sure they have an idea. I do think the president is obviously trying to be optimistic and upbeat, but when he says it's productive, I think even the tiniest step toward conversation, toward communication, is a positive step, is moving forward. So I don't think that's a stretch to say that. We've heard from Iran, no, we don't want to talk. We have no interest in talk. We have no interest in negotiating. We've heard a number of absolutes in that. So after all those absolutes, if the president was hearing, okay, from, via Pakistan or via someone else, there were messages being passed back and forth, but that was still a step further than it was for, say, the first 20 days.
Is this all part of some sort of constructive ambiguity, then, to keep as many options on the table as possible, but at the same time to essentially confound your enemy, confuse your enemy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no guarantee that anything is going to lead to a ceasefire, that anything is going to lead to...
That's cold comfort for us in the Gulf, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, that for everybody, for worldwide. It's the worst in the Gulf, but the entire world is feeling it now. So there's no guarantee, so you do have to plan. And as I said, both sides have to plan. The United States has to plan for all sides. They want to come out victorious, and I like talking about winning because both sides claim they are winning. Both sides' definition of winning appears to be very different. But from President Trump's standpoint, winning means walking away with at least some of the objectives that he laid out at the beginning. And the one thing that he's been very consistent about is a nuclear-free Iran. He wants to see a severely degraded ballistic missile program. And they'd like to see no more money and support, arming support, for the proxy groups that destabilize the entire region. So he needs to be able to come away with at least 2 out of 3 of those in order to truthfully claim that he's got a victory. If he goes for 30 days or 60 days, loses a handful of American troops, spends hundreds of billions of dollars, and comes back with nothing, there really isn't a way for him to claim.
What about winning public opinion back home? Because according to the Quinnipiac poll, we're looking at 70% of your fellow citizens, independents and Democrats, explicitly reject this war. Is that a mandate for leadership?
Well, I don't think there's a whole lot of people in any poll in the history of the world that say, yes, I like war. Nobody says that. I think you need to look at some other polls. Rasmussen is the most reputable pollster in America. They've gotten every presidential election right for the last presidential election down to within about 1/10 of a point. Very good at what they do. And they've actually looked in January, before any of the conflict, they did a poll that looked at 47% of America preferred a Democrat Congress come fall. 41% said Republican. That was a 6% Democrat lead. That's actually shrunk by 2%.
But will it shrink enough by the time of the midterms? So it's only a few months down the line.
My point is, you would think it would have gone the other way.
You think people will have forgotten by November about everything that's happened in the past few months?
I am amazed at how short the public's attention span is when it comes to voting and comes to politics. In January of 2020, President Trump was impeached. In September, October, and November that year, it literally wasn't even mentioned.
So you don't think any of this matters?
No, of course it matters. I'm not saying that. I'm answering your question. Of course it matters, and of course it has an impact, and it's a broad impact. You have economic impact, you have the perception impact. The people that hate Trump are going to hate Trump. The people that love Trump are going to love Trump. but there's probably 40 or 45% in the center who you're trying to capture.
OK, that's the midterms. What about the World Cup? That's in June. I mean, that's meant to be Donald Trump's global victory lap, isn't it?
Oh, it should be a wonderful summer. The World Cup, obviously, for the whole world watching. This is also America's 250th anniversary. That's July 4th.
All under the shadow of war.
All under the shadow of war, potentially. We hope that things are solved by then. And again, that emphasizes why it's important, if he could end this in the next 30 or 60 days and do so under those three criteria, I said, this will come away as a victory. He'll be able to claim that. Much of America will agree with that. He'll be fine. If he ends this war without achieving any of those, he'll take a huge hit in the polls.
Tim, not that long ago, we heard from the spokesperson of Qatar's foreign ministry, who describing Iran's decision to repeatedly attack Gulf nations and close the Strait of Hormuz as the ultimate I told you so in the history of I told you so's. But apparently Donald Trump didn't see it coming. Why not?
Well, whether he saw it coming or not, I don't know. But I would say Iran's not winning a whole lot of fans or followers from that. While much of the world isn't thrilled that the United States struck Iran, virtually everyone is lined up against Iran. If you look at every single Gulf state, with the exception of Yemen, has come out and made some sort of statement. Obviously, UAE is the most aggressive. But if you go around, there are statements that have been made both publicly and privately in the diplomatic circles that they are very, very unhappy with Iran. Over 100 nations co-sponsored a resolution in the United Nations to condemn Iran. So if the plan on Iran's part was to get the rest of the world mad at America, they have failed at that, and literally quite the opposite appears to be happening.
I think you could probably ask any high school student in the Middle East that it was going to be Iran's asymmetric trump card, excuse the pun, to close the Strait of Hormuz, wasn't it? It doesn't inspire a huge amount of trust in America being the custodians of global trade and the power that's continuously able to keep trade globally moving when something like this happens right on everyone's doorstep.
Sure, and I think it shows the outrageous nature you mentioned earlier in this program about the points that Iran had requested in order to even sit down and begin a discussion. And one of those was what the United States would go ahead and recognize their authority to control the strait in perpetuity. I've never heard a more absurd demand. In the United States, we have a joke where if you're going to kidnap someone or make demands in some situation, you always throw in one crazy demand. And I thought, boy, that's Iran's crazy demand.
Why is the United States waiting now, while we're in the midst of energy shocks at the end of March, to scramble together some sort of Strait of Hormuz coalition, something that many European powers, NATO allies, want no part of, nothing to do with Greenland, of course, let's put that aside for the time being. But isn't it a bit of an afterthought now, when many are saying this should have been dealt with on day one? And now look at the mess.
It should have, and it's not that hard to imagine that it was a possibility along the way. I would say President Trump has many strengths, but one of them is not... It just
makes people think how much the United States actually understands Iran and it's how much it values survival.
How much it values its own survival?
Own survival, yes.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about there. While there will be a hit on the economy in the United States, it will be far less. It will be absorbed much easier than the rest of the globe.
My point being how far Iran is prepared to go, how much pain it is prepared to endure. That seems to have been a blind spot in U.S. foreign policy.
I don't think so at all. And if pain tolerance is the measure, they have selected the wrong United States president for that. If this was Joe Biden, he didn't even want to go in for Osama bin Laden when they had him cornered. They would have had the right guy. Donald Trump's pain tolerance, whether it's in his own personal life, whether it's in business situations, or whether it's in the political world, is extraordinary. You can like him or dislike him, but he is not bothered when the media dislikes him. He is not bothered when you insult him on air. He is not bothered when the polls don't look good. He has a belief in what he's trying to achieve and will continue on that path.
What about the inadvertent pain inflicted upon the United States' closest, most loyal allies across the Middle East? That was unwarranted, no?
Absolutely. It's kind of like if a kidnapper takes my child and then tells me I have to make a decision or he'll kill that child. If the child is killed, that's not really my responsibility. It's the kidnappers. In this case, Iran is making the choice to strike its neighbors and friends, not the United States. When Iran hit Oman, it might be the most blatant of these. Oman not only is a friend, Oman was the one trying to broker the agreement here. Foreign minister there is an incredible guy, and the fact that they're still hitting Oman now shows you what Iran is made of. That's not the United States doing that. That's Iran.
Nevertheless, what the Omanis say they were on the verge of achieving by way of concessions from Iran seems to have been completely ignored. Those comments from the Omanis saying, look, we've got something that resembles progress, literally within 24 hours, Israel and the United States.
I literally spoke with
Iran.
the foreign minister of Oman that night, so I might have more insight into what he did and didn't say or did or didn't believe that night. He was hopeful that they could avoid. He knew they were on the cusp of military activity. He was hopeful, but when you look at the paperwork that was brought, both sides had come to Geneva with papers in hand. Here's what we think, here's what we think. And Iran literally wouldn't hand over the paper. They said verbally, they shared what their ideas were. And they went through a list that said, we want you to recognize our sovereign right to develop as much, to as high a grade, enrich as much uranium to as high a grade as we want. And we want to be able to stockpile it. In other words, we don't want any change whatsoever to our nuclear program. We don't want to talk about ballistic missiles, and we're not going to discuss proxies. So what they came and refused to give on paper but said verbally was, we're not going to do anything. So that isn't coming close to an agreement. It's not even slightly close, not one step closer.
Tim, it's been a pleasure having you here and hearing your thoughts. Many thanks. Tim Constantine.
Thanks very much.